Welcome to Feel Seen Space. We are a digital platform designed for artists and creatives who yearn for more. At a time of massive change, what does it mean to create? What role does artistic expression serve for the individual and the collective? On this podcast, we try to answer these questions by interviewing artists on their holistic creative processes, their work, and their personal journey. Hello everyone, welcome to Feel Seen Space. Today's episode is very special for me because I'm interviewing my singing teacher, Krešimir Špicer. Krešimir is an opera singer, a tenor. Originally from Croatia, he studied in Amsterdam and went on to have an international career as an opera singer. We discuss many things, from the world of opera to living life as an artist, navigating the highs of representations and rehearsals and quieter times in Paris with his family and his students. We also talk about why music, and singing in particular, is such a profound practice and essential part of the human experience. I always come back from my singing classes feeling nourished by Kresimir's wisdom and humor, and I'm so glad I get to share some of that with you today. Welcome, Krešimir.
Thank you very much,
We're
Sara.
very happy to have you on the podcast. I wanted to start with your upbringing and where did you grow up and did you come from a creative family from the start?
So I grew up in Croatia. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was born still in Yugoslavia. I was still existent when I was born. And then when it broke up, it became Croatia, of course, with all the other republics. And so I grew up in a family which was more like, my grandparents had a business and my father worked first in that business. They had like a little factory, wool factory. They were producing sweaters and things like that. Nice. And my mom came from the nearby village. Actually, lovely romantic story. She came to be an apprentice in the factory and then met my father, fell in love. So that's very nice. From my mother's side, I think she lost her father very early, at a very early age. But he seemed to be a man who was very creative, very artistic. And everybody always says to me when I'm there, because besides singing, I was always doing something. I was not sure whether I was going to be singing. I was also painting and drawing and sculpting and doing from very early age. I loved all these things. And my father was somebody who wanted to be a professional musician. He sang very, very beautifully and he played accordion very well. And then he taught himself to play a guitar, but it was forbidden, by his father because musicians are alcoholics, and so it was a different time period. I have an older brother, he's 3 years older, and then when we were of age, it was normal for us, to go to music school. Later, when my brother decided to become also a musician, he wanted to be actually a conductor, and he finished the academy in Zagreb, and he became a conductor and also professor of music. For a very long time, a director of our concert music hall and opera and ballet and all that. And now he's the director of the City Museum. And so always something with art. But why I mentioned that is because literally I remember there was this dinner and it was around Christmas time. And then there was always my father with accordion and then we singing for hours and drinking. But I remember that the whole family protested because my brother was quite a good intellectual guy, and so they were like, no, this will ruin his life. And then my father literally stood up, but, he said, no, he's going to do what he wants. I remember this vividly. A bit of a struggle, it's not as easy as people think to just kind of choose your path also. It can be forbidden because it's a very small town somewhere in Croatia on the border with Bosnia, a very small industrial town, lovely place. The people might know it from Agatha Christie's books because the Orient Express train stops in Brod. So when it came to me, the choice was very simple because I always sang a lot. Apparently I sang before I spoke I didn't know how to pronounce the words, but I was singing. What was very nice is that we were not, neither my brother nor me, we were not pushed. He was extraordinary. He was also a very good pianist, and we were actually quite busy because my mom also sang quite beautifully, and she always sang in the church choir. And this is a very nice side of the story, because there was this nun in this church. She was absolutely brilliant. She was very natural, and like my brother, he could play piano, and so she taught him how to play organ. And since, we were kids, it was through play, and so when it came to me, it was the same. My first solo was at 3 years old. I was singing a song during a very important mass. I was literally so small, she had to bring like a chair so I can stand on the, and the whole church was like, what the hell is this? I would never suffered, for instance, from stage fright. Because I was so used to go in front of the people and sing, that I didn't have any, when people talked about it, I understand where it comes from. I would feel definitely butterflies and like the adrenaline growing and all that, but not fright. This brilliant nun was really great because, she obviously saw a talent both in my brother and me. What's interesting in music, that there are things that are quite difficult when you go later in musical education. There's something called singing from the page, which is basically a vista singing, which somebody gives you a piece of music and you just kind of sing. You have to sing it from the first view. And she did it constantly with us. Like she would say, okay, this is what you're going to sing today on the mass. Go there in the little room and just look through the music. It was really weird, kind of natural thing that we didn't really discuss it. How we kind of did it was very, very natural and very simple.
Like
and no
reading,
pressure.
Like reading English or any...
Yeah, with any language. And that it is true, like music for me, it's a weird thing. It's like a part of the whole existence. I cannot explain that. From very early age, like if somebody was singing, I would immediately sing different voices to accompany harmonically. And then somebody told me later that it was something very complicated and difficult to do. But I had no idea. And then very quickly I started singing whenever I could. So I was singing in many choirs and many different places and helping out. And then in my high school, there was a very good music teacher, and we had a very, very good choir in high school. And she heard my talent, and then she always gave me solo to sing. And by pure accident, she knew a very famous Croatian singer, an older lady who did a very beautiful international career. And she called her up and said, listen, there's this boy, he's really, really big talent, so would you at least hear him out, But then something weird happened, because during the war, there was a gentleman from Holland who brought a lot of different aid and help to my town. But there was a big bombardment in my town, and so the bombs are falling, and we're hiding in the basement, the whole choir, and we prepared a concert for him. So we still wanted to do the concert. And the mayor calls me up to the town. He said, can you come and sing the hymn? And I'm like, sure. So I'm on the bicycle, going through the bombs. And then he was so taken by this. When I project this to my life now, I can really imagine it must have been a very special moment for him. He then decided he could not bring 1,200 kids to Holland, but he decided to organize a trip for the choir. So we went to Holland 2 times, actually. Then he also organized it in a way that we would sleep in the families there, and then we would also give concerts in a couple of high schools. Then, of course, we were asked to speak with these young people who you come out of war, so how is that, what's going on, explaining and all that. Then a group of people heard me there, and then they got an idea to organize a kind of a scholarship for me, so I could come and study in Amsterdam, in Holland. I always understood that it's a big opportunity, and I also understood that, I needed to create some kind of environment that I could actually survive. And my teacher helped me a lot with that. Like, I came in September, And my teacher already found a concert for me like in October. So I'm now 49 years old, but I have like 31 years of career because I started literally having the first contracts when I was 18, right? But also for me, I spoke with her very openly. I said, listen, my goal is to create a network to be able to continue doing this, because there's no point in me going back. There's nothing in Croatia, especially at that time. The country was struggling with everything, not only culturally. So this is how I kind of started, and then it went further from there. And then, by pure chance, I was at the right time on the right place to come and sing for William Christie, who is a great French conductor. Well, actually, he's American, but he's settled here in France. They were looking for young singers to sing an opera called Il ritorno di Ulisse in patria, which is the return of Ulysses, by Monteverdi. At that time, I was with a singer, and she was alt mezzo, and I said to her, oh, you have to prepare Penelope, and I will prepare Ulysses, and then we have to prepare the last duet. And then when we both showed up, they gave us these parts. So this was all happening in the international festival in Aix-en-Provence. And then, of course, from there, I had a lot of job opportunities to come to France, especially in festival in Aix. But since it's a big, big international festival, of course, it helps immensely to be recognized immediately, to be seen and heard. And this, by chance, it was a very good group of people. We were all very, very young, but big, big talents. And this became a huge success. So the festival then later organized like a big tour, which was going literally everywhere. We're like New York, London, Vienna, Bordeaux, Paris. We had like 80 shows or something like that. It was a few months long tour. And then we came back to Aix and then had another 8 shows there, I think. And then it was filmed for the DVD. So it was a huge, explosion suddenly from being a student. I was still a student, technically, when all this was happening. So, and it was an interesting thing, because with Mariana, she was Serbian, I was Croatian, and the war was still very fresh. So, everybody wanted a piece of that, and it was, it can be blown out of proportion. I remember when we were in New York, I was called by this guy from New York Times, and then New York Times made this exception because New York Times has never a classical point of view on the first page, and there we were on the first page, love bridges borders of hate, me and Mariana and our story, a modern life, Romeo and Juliet, she's Serbian, people who destroyed Croatia, and I'm Croatian, but then we still are together, and blah, blah, blah. Gary Goldstein, the producer, Pretty Woman, calls me on the phone, literally, hi, it's Gary, I want to make a movie about you guys. I was like, no, you don't. It was really crazy.
Why did you say no?
Oh, I think it's for all the right reasons. I didn't want this to be a part of my life because I didn't do any war, neither did she, Nowadays people would jump on that with all the gravity and everything they could to become famous and to have likes and all that. This didn't exist at that time, we are talking 99. In the previous century. And I was not at all interested in revisiting that part of my life, my history, and neither did she. And I think that since we were singers, I didn't want to be put in that kind of frame,
Right.
It was not a very interesting thing for me at that time, and I didn't want to exploit that at all. But just to say how crazy life gets, And then, because it was so blown up out of proportion, I remember my family came to see the show, and we went out to eat, and it was literally impossible. People would queue up for us to sign and we couldn't eat. So it's that part that I actually never liked or never really cared for. I acknowledge the fact that it's nice to have a big applause and a standing ovation and all that, But I never did it for that. I'm doing it because I love to do it. And I don't care if there are 5 people in the audience of 50 million. It's the same, for me. Singing for me is it's like a part of everyday life, and you just do it. And I think it's a very simple thing in a way. So why France? Because then eventually a lot of working in France, and beautiful place. I sang a lot in Rome, in Italy, and in Paris I visited a lot. And I always thought either I'm going to end up in Rome or in Paris, And then in 2004, I met my wife, who is a costume designer and designed costumes for this opera I was in. And we fell in love, and then she lived in Paris. And then she was like, should I move to Amsterdam? I was like, nope, no. And also I said, listen, then we are both strangers. And I'm like, at least here you're at home.
Lovely.
Yes.
And so I'm curious to dive more into the opera world. Everyone has this idea of what opera is, but I feel like very few people actually know what it is. Do you feel like it's quite a niche genre or a bit of an elitist aspect of culture nowadays?
Exactly, nowadays. Point.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
The problem with the opera, of course, is that it's absolutely for everybody. Everybody! The trouble is, when human race, we tend to make institution out of things. So, Bach is an institution. Johann Sebastian Bach, But I don't see it like that. Bach was this, slightly overweight guy who loved drinking and eating, and who's writing things quickly. And look at Mozart, look at his life. Milos Forman's film, although historically very inaccurate, is showing a lot of truth in it. How music is made, how music was made. And at that time, these guys were rock stars of today. Well, not even today, even better. And how shall I say that? They were men of blood and flesh. So I don't think that it should be seen like that at all. But our society loves to do that. And then a few centuries later, it becomes something that it definitely shouldn't be. That's one part. But then the other part is, it's the only art form that combines all the arts together. It's the only art form that does that.
Yeah.
So you have everything. You have visual and everything that comes to that. So that makeup, costumes, set design, lights, everything that goes with that. Then you have, of course, all the artisanal things of people who have to make that. So there's somebody, like if I'm looking at my wife, first she has to draw the costumes. You have to imagine them. But then you have to go to the library, you have to do the research if it's a period thing, if it's sometimes some mishmash of things, okay, then you can imagine what you like. But if it's very strict period, like if you're doing, like middle 18th century thing, then you have to do research on that, and she draws it. And then, she has to go to somewhere in Lyon. There is a big place with thousands and thousands of fabrics. Or you have to go to Italy or London to choose fabrics from. Then you have to make an atelier. If they don't have it atelier, usually in big operas they have their own atelier, but when you're in some smaller theaters or something like that, they don't. So you have to make your own atelier. Then you have to find people who will actually make it. Like people who will cut into those and then make it, and then do the essayage, do all the tryouts, and so it's a big process from that point of view. Yeah. And then you have all the people who will find money for all that, because it's very, very expensive to do all that. So you have to do one. So the opera house in itself is an enterprise. It's a really little enterprise. There are, like in the Opera Bastille, I don't know, there are probably a couple of hundreds of people working there. Because it's not just singers, it's like you have people who have to make it happen. Then you have the technicians. They have like an army of at least 60, 100 technicians. Because these huge sets have to be moved, have to be brought on, So you have all these different ateliers which are working, this guy is only painting. The other guy is only painting on his paint, but what is he doing? He's making it old. He's doing la patine, So you have a guy, his job description is, I'm a patineur. He only does that. He destroys things that are made so they look old, And from that point of view, it's a bit like film, only it's live. So we go in completely at the end, the singers and the musicians. We come in at the end, which doesn't mean we did not prepare for years before. Because big roles, they need a lot of time to grow and prepare. And so you might start, like if I get a contract now for, 2029, I will start, and if it's a complicated role, I will look at it now, and then I leave it, and then I look at it again, and then I leave it, and look at it again. So you revisit it, you have to learn it by heart. It takes me forever just to translate. It looks very flashy, and it looks very in your face sometimes, I think it's important to note that it's definitely for everybody. It's not for the elite, because the elite very usually doesn't mean that they are connoisseur of the opera at all. But the trouble with all that is that it is expensive, actually. It's actually an art form which always loses money. And this is why it's so difficult. This is why we also need always not only big mécénat, like people like sponsors and all that. We also, the state needs to give something for it. And now, of course, when there are problems, which is now, since COVID already, we are struggling a lot. Any art world is struggling because there's less and less money for that. And the operas are really, really struggling. So you have to realize that even if the opera sells out every time, all the tickets they have, they're still losing money. Somebody said it, I think, already in the beginning of the 19th century, that it's an art form that's dying, but never really dies. Because it costs a lot of money to do it properly.
But what do you think would be a good solution then to make it more available to the masses and to educate the younger generations to get to know and love? Because, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's hard to just show up at any show and enjoy it as much if you don't really know the story already, if you don't know the context. I feel like it needs a bit of education before you get to the opera. And so how could we make that happen? So just that more people relate to this art form.
But it was very easy in the beginning because people were living and breathing with this kind of music. As I already mentioned, Mozart was a rock star in his old time. So people would go in and out of the opera and everybody was welcome. So you had very good seats for people who were very rich, and then a little bit better seats for those who are less rich. But people they could come in and everybody could listen and see it. And in his own time, he was very happy when somebody was whistling on the street one of his arias, from his operas. So this was a different time, right? And it goes through the centuries that this kind of education, musical education, was seen as part of the normal cultural education. People were also very usually, they played an instrument, they went to music school. And also don't forget that we did not have any kind of entertainment before, rather than human voice and instruments. So people sang much more before. Like simple families, people who had no musical education would sing simple songs to each other. We were singing before much, much more. This is completely lost. This is completely lost. Like people say, oh, you sang with your parents. It's absolutely ridiculous. It sounds like a movie from the 19th century. But it's true. We could put music on, but we just thought we'll just do it ourselves. And it's much better. So you really share something different than rather just listening to the music. So I think that this is part of the problem. The second part of the problem is that art in any form is completely neglected in schools. So we are trying to focus on something called mathematics, which is ridiculous. They always say like, oh, this is very important. It makes people think. Well, for everybody who wants to know more about this, they should read Oliver Sacks, his beautiful book called Musicophilia. He's a neurologist. He's a very, very good scientist and also brilliant amateur pianist who could easily have a big career as a pianist, but decided to become a scientist. And he was very interested in human brain and tries to figure out, one of the things that always puzzles him is, why is it that Alzheimer patients can remember, 6 couplets from a song and can't remember their own children? What is it with music that does that? And then he discovered something. He was trying to see how the brain works and try to see how is actually the brain stimulated when it's working on just like washing the dishes, and then doing something more complex, and then he came to mathematics. And then, of course, different parts of brain illuminate, and it's a very, very stimulating thing. But then he always stresses, but then I did it with somebody playing an instrument, and your brain becomes a Christmas tree because it's everything working in the same time.
Yeah.
And then he says, this is very important. He says, I wish we could understand that. So I'm always saying to everybody who listens, send your kid to music school. Always. Don't neglect it, because it develops something completely different. Because you see, it's not only 2 + 2 is 4. So you have to understand it. You have to be able to read music. And then it's only the beginning. Because then you have to learn how to play it. So it's motoric. You have to put your fingers on the right spot, on the right time. So there's all that involved. And then when you learn how to play it very well, it's still only the beginning. Because then you have to interpret it. Otherwise, it's just dead. That you're just playing the music, it says nothing. And then it goes on and on and on. So it's very, very interesting and complex thing, actually doing music, you know. And slightly less when we start to talk about modern music, because, you know, what is it? Maybe 70% of the songs are 4 chords, you know, on the guitar that everybody can literally learn and play.
Yeah.
But it's and then it just changes, like the music changes slightly. It's fantastic. I love rock music. I love it. I had a rock band when I was younger. But when you start to look at classical music and start to try to understand it, it gets very, very complex. So what I'm trying to say is that how to fix the problem is definitely bring more music in your life, not only by saying to children, you have to go to school. No, from a very early age, you have to make the very, very small children like music and enjoy music and see how it's very interesting and beautiful and all that. And then create an atmosphere in which he will later be musically curious. Because today we are not musically curious anymore. If Rihanna or, you know, whatever does a new song, it's immediately, oh, she's fantastic. They are amazing performers. People should not mix those things. Being a fantastic performer is a really hard job, and they are. One of the best is Lady Gaga. I mean, what she did in her career, it's absolutely amazing. And seeing her live it's a big, big show that she puts on, a greatly talented lady. So it's not about that. I'm saying that the music itself, it's very, very easy. It's few chords, a little bit of rhythm and all that. But what she does with it, of course, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But then we have the Beatles, then we have also Rolling Stones and, you know, Led Zeppelin and, you know, as we go backwards, you know. And they're all great. They're all great performers. They're all great people. But the music is different. And I think our society nowadays, it's also that we are changing our views on many things. And opera becomes boring. You know, we are doing much too much physics and mathematics, and we are thinking less and less about what really makes a human being, you know, jealousy, love. We are much too quick into making decisions, what we like, what we don't like. And I think that's a pity, you know. I think that staying curious is the most beautiful thing you can be in life. Yeah. But the other part of the problem, I think, it's of course that the speed of life used to be much slower, really. I feel it as somebody who is only 49. And then my grandparents don't understand nothing anymore. You know, they're like, what are you people doing? You know, when are you going to start living? Everybody's just running. And I think that people should kind of just stop and take time for things, you know? Yeah. So opera is long, but this is also...
It's like a commitment, I guess.
But it's historically, you know, opera used to go on for hours. Because sometimes, you know, if I take out books of real opera books, they're like this thick. You know, there's some Mozart operas that are like 500-600 pages long. Because opera started with 3 ballets first. Opera was like a center to meet. So it went on for hours, you know. So now we reduce it a lot. So there are a lot of cuts in the opera. It's already modified for our way of living. But it still can be long. It can be at least 3 hours long, easily. And there are a lot of people who can't bear sitting for 3 hours in one place. They're just like, And the trouble is that even if you look at the social media, now a reel is too long if it's 10 seconds. We can't go on like that. So I think this definitely has to change. Huh?
I think it's changing already because now, for the first time, it is measured that people spend actually less and less time on social media. For the first time, it's decreasing, which is good news because, as you said, it was unsustainable and it's not our natural rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think is good news. And you see like younger kids going back to like older phones and reading more. So I think that people understand that it's not good for them. And then going back to music complexity, I feel like for the past few years, there's been a lot of new things that allow people with like no experience and no, musical education to create music. And it's great for it to be so accessible. You can like create melodies and even like sing something and it writes the music for you and that kind of thing, which is, in a way, it's great. But then you see, like, especially in the past year, like 2025, artists that are really like to the forefront of musical experimentation that are slowly bringing complexity back. And there's 2 albums in particular where people are actually referencing opera. And these are like pop singers or even hip hop or rap. And they're really referencing that and bringing back the chords and the choirs and all that. So I think that, it comes in waves. And surely it's gonna come back around.
I definitely hope so. Because it's I've always said it as much as I can that opera is definitely for everybody. And and then people say, yeah, it's so expensive to buy a ticket. But then how come that when there is a big football match, it's packed, even if it's 60,000 seats, it's packed with people and it's more expensive than the opera. So that's a big, interesting question, I think. What do you want to spend your money on? I love football. I watch it a lot, especially I love playing and all that. So that's not the point. The thing is that it's what you like, what you prefer,
value,
and how but I think that people are usually discovering opera in our society a little bit later. That's also a very common thing. If you go to the opera, if you decide you've never been, don't start with a heavy opera. So you definitely don't want to go and start with a Wagner Ring, or some heavy, Verdi or Puccini or whatever. You need a simple story. You need something, go to see La Flûte Enchantée, the Zauberflöte by Mozart, or go and see an opera which is maybe funny, go to see The Barber of Seville, go to see Carmen by Bizet, go to see something which is much more available, which is much more human. Somebody stupid falls down, the other one is heroic, kills a bad guy, Go to see that, because it's funny, because it speaks to us, because it's easier. If nobody read something, you will not give them Émile Zola to read. You will maybe give them stories by Hans Christian Andersen to read first, to get some kind of taste about what is it, So you don't want to kill yourself with the wrong repertoire too early, The same is in any kind of music. So if you're going to listen to any kind of orchestra, maybe it's a good idea not to go immediately to listen to, Brahms or Beethoven or something like that, Go to listen to some, maybe impressionists. For the opera, it's important to get a little bit more curious than just in choosing the right piece, is that if you choose the piece, always at least just read the story.
Right.
Because the music goes on, and if it's a good opera or expensive opera, it will have subtitles, so it's much easier. But usually they don't. So you listen to people singing, and you see things happening, but it's very hard to really understand. Because if you just read a story, I know it's counterproductive. Somebody will say, yeah, but it's stupid. If I go to see the movie, I'm not going to read about the movie and not see the movie. So, no, it's a different thing, because in the movies, if you speak English and they're in English, you understand everything. But in opera, it's not the case, And it's important to do that, just to enjoy more. You can be more relaxed. But I actually, like you, to finish on the positive note, everybody that listened to me and left, they all became completely hooked on. Because it is an interesting thing. It deals with very simple things to very, very complex things. It can be provocative, as any kind of artwork, it can make you think a lot. We did not mention one very important thing. Seeing opera on the TV and listening live, it's two different worlds. It's like going to the different planet. I cried when the CDs came out because LPs had a different way of putting down the human voice and the orchestra and everything. You could see, you could hear cracks, you could hear, and the music had much more depth. With the CD and DVD, it became much more flat. And so when you go live, you see how people are transformed, because it's just by sheer sound sometimes of it. If you have a big orchestra of 120 people playing Strauss, the whole stage is like, oh my God, this is fantastic! On you. And also I remember one of the most beautiful things happened when I sang, that was during the COVID time, and I was in Innsbruck, and I don't know how they decided to go on with this thing that we were supposed to produce, with all the masks and everything. And I remember singing on the stage, and the whole audience packed, all of them crying like in tears, just by listening to human voice live.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. So definitely listen to it on the social media, Spotify, whatever you want. But go to see it live, at least once in your life, just to feel the real thing.
Do you ever lose track on your creative projects? Maybe you're a professional artist or creative, but what used to be your passion now feels uninspiring. Or maybe you decided to pursue a safer career path, but you just know you have that artistic side of you that's dying to come out. At Feel Seen Space, our mission is to get you back in touch with your creativity, your flow, and your purpose. If you're ready to feel seen, we offer one-on-one holistic mentoring sessions designed to reconnect you to your inner artist. You'll find all the information at the link in the show notes. We hope to see you soon. To go back to you and your experience, what does a typical week look like? Because it seemed like, you have the production, you have to prepare for the performances, but then how is that rhythm to be in between projects?
I think really everybody struggles with it in their own way. It's very hard to be on the production and then not to bring home work, because it's very emotional and it really depends on the role. I used to sing a lot of heroic roles, like always a king or a prince or, somebody like that, and then it's a bit easier. I remember the first time I sang a really bad guy, the guy who wants to kill the hero.
Okay.
I remember my wife saying to me at the point, really literally saying to me, can you just stop being angry? And I said, what do you mean? Like I had, he said, yeah, you're just pissed off all the time, And I'm like, but I'm not at all. But you kind of, you inhabit that world, and you're kind of, like, it doesn't leave you. My mind works like that, huh? It's always something turning inside. Maybe, I guess everybody deals with that in their own way. But usually life is very simple, I always gave singing lessons since the very, very beginning of my musical education. So a normal day or a week, would be the students coming, and then in between the students, you look at the roles that you want, whatever. But I'm also very much a family guy, I love to cook. Cooking is a bit like singing, You have to put the right things inside, and then you have to experiment and see how it goes. And so I do all that. But preparing a role, as I already said, it depends on the complexity of the music. So let's say that it will be easier to prepare something which is like an oratorio, which is more like sacred music. So this is basically trying to learn, learning the music and then interpreting the music as best as you can. Opera or song is more complex because it has tons and tons of text. I'm Croatian, and I try to always first understand and translate anything in my own language. So I know what the meaning of every word is, but also the poetic meaning, right? So I spend a lot of time translating everything, and then I sing. You're always first seduced by music, of course. You hear something and think, it's lovely, I sing that. But then you start working, you forget about music for a while, and then translate and think, what does it really mean? What does it say? Because you have to realize, if I'm to interpret Roman Emperor Titus for you, I have to really work on that. Because this is really the acting part of my job. If I don't do it properly, it will not be believable. I can sing as beautiful as I can, but if I don't do that other part of the work, you will still go like, that's weird, Titus. So it has to come together.
Knowing you from taking lessons with you, I feel like there's a lot of physical work involved, like on the daily to stay in shape and do vocal training just to like be in perfect...
Yes, that's a part of any artistic work. If you reach a certain level, and I have to say this properly because it's a little bit complicated. One shouldn't have, this is my level and expecting that level and living on that level all 24 hours and whatever. Because you see, it's an extraordinary thing being on the stage and being with so much energy and doing things that you never do. So you need to kind of let time to settle down. So people tend to suffer. I have quite some colleagues who tend to suffer from these big differences because it's kind of schizophrenic. You have to become somebody, then you go home and then there's nothing. And I think it's art is being somewhere slightly in the middle, accepting that sometimes it will go up, but also accepting that you have to come down and then search for the thing.
Yeah.
And but it's still very hard because it's, a lot of adrenaline is used in that, and we have, I don't know whether people realize actually how complex it is because everything has to come in the same time at the same moment. And it goes on for 3 or 4 hours. That is what is so extraordinary. When you watch a movie, it can be edited. And the movie is made out of a lot of little sequences. But the opera, it starts there and it ends at the end,
Yeah.
So you need a lot of concentration and high level of energy as well. So that's one part. To be able to do that, of course, is taking care of yourself, of your body and everything else. So these are also can be quite problematic because there are people who go crazy with that, who never drink any alcohol or any ice cream or anything. So I very early in my career decided to I always thought that's bollocks. I thought, no, you have to live, otherwise you become crazy. And of course, there are things that I do. You have to rest before the performance. So you can't just go around running the whole day and they say, I will sing tonight.
Yeah.
You can't. So there is a rest involved. And then, a lot of like exercises like stretching, yoga or whatever. These are very good, to do that. And then physically, I like to walk. So, walking for a couple of hours a day, it's very important.
What I learned from you is that, of course, it's a very 360 job where you need to have like the knowledge of the music, the theory, and you need to have the practice, and then you need to be in really good body shape because it's a workout, and you also need to be an artist and like express all these emotions. But then at the end of the day, like you say, your instrument is inside of you. It's not like you just take your flute or your piano and you know that the instrument is this separate thing. It's very much inside of you. It's very intimate. So how do you deal with that? I know that in the context, for example, of really emotional moments like grief and things like that, people can feel like they can't express anything. Like how do you approach having your working instrument so intimately inside your body?
That is very hard. I mean, I remember when my father died, literally 2 weeks later I had to sing, and it was very, very hard. As you say, you have a knot in your, you want to, because the singing is pure emotion. So it was really, it was very, very hard. There are no cure for that, but these are extreme situations. I think that in the normal everyday life, it's something that's a part of you. It's a part of a daily routine, as you will wake up, wash your face, then wash your teeth, and then something is like that you will stretch and you will do this and you will, think about your voice, warm up slowly your voice and all that. I think it's a part of the everyday life, basically. But how to deal with the emotional side, that's very complex. I have to say, I have a lot of colleagues and myself, I've been in many situations where indeed it can be a really big problem. Somebody can piss you off and it plays with your head immediately, But of course it's still in your head only. So if you can be as peaceful with yourself as to say, no, it's only in your head, there's no point in worrying. I see that sometimes you think, oh my God, I'm ill, I can't sing,
Yeah.
And then you start warming up, and then I always said to myself, okay, of course you have a deadline. You have to call the opera at a certain stage if you really can't sing and cancel. That's a big part of the problem, I did it few times happily in my 30 plus years career, because also you have to understand your instrument and your own body. And you have to also be very patient and say, okay, I'm ill, I don't feel well, so I have to be very patient and try to do it slowly. If I'm going to sing something and people are coming, they pay to listen to me. So I can't just say, I'm ill today, so, you can't. So you have to sing, And if I'm going to sing, then I have to do a certain level, and under a certain level there is no point, because then you're really cheating. You just want their money for nothing. So that's I never do that. I always say, I stay very honest to that, and I'm like, okay, if I can do it, I will try to do it, and if I can't, then... But happily, only a few times I had to cancel.
I'm also curious about your experience as a teacher, because as you said, you've done that for a long, long time, and you do that for seasoned professionals, other opera singers, other types of singers, and you also do that for total rookies like me.
Yes.
And so do you notice like a similar thread or something that connects these people? Why do people come to your studio? Why do people want to learn how to sing?
Well, I think it's people who are curious. It's a way of communication. I think it's that yourself, if I'm thinking about you, you love music. You like music, and you like lots of different types of music, So that's already a fantastic starting point. And then, since you also learned flute, and you went to music school, that's that part as well. And then a lot of other ingredients come in. And then simply, you wanted to find out, you were curious enough to open the door and say, can I have a singing lesson, And it's as far as that, it's like anything else in life. If you want to learn how to dance, or if you want to learn how to paint or draw or any kind of artistic thing. And I think that singing is an interesting thing, because you mentioned very, very nicely before, it's inside. Our instrument is inside the singers. So it's hugely complex, because if you play any kind of other instrument, it's detached. So you can be very angry, or you can be very sad, or you can be ill, or you can be very happy, but you can always press on the piano and it will always give you pum, it will give you the same note, Of course, it doesn't mean that with the temperature 41, if you're a pianist, that you will do a concert in the Carnegie Hall. I think he will cancel, or she. But okay, that's not the point. The point is that if you start dealing with an instrument which is inside, you have to also be prepared to discover about yourself. It can be sometimes very deep, I, as a teacher, my job is to undo the wrong habits. And that's really hard. Because, I come to you and say, yeah, but you're doing this, but, it's really wrong. You should do that. Physically wrong. You will maybe do a wrong movement or something like that. But it's your own habit. And you're singing for forever like that, And then comes this man and says, yeah, but that's really something you shouldn't do. And it's really hard, But that's only like muscles, Then you need a lot of energy. You need to be on a little bit elevated place, inspired place, to be able really to sing and enjoy it, Otherwise, just trying to give a good note, So it's complex and it's hard, because if you really want it to work, then you have to do the totality, everything at the same time. So it has to be, and the good words, and the good notes, and the good breath, and the good posture, and the blah, blah, blah. Everything has to come in the same time, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why we work. But I think singing teachers, we can help a lot with also different kind of things. Like I had a couple of people coming over just so that I teach them a little bit better how to speak. Like a good friend of mine, she's a professor of English in the university, and she every Friday she would have aphonia, you know, she would lose her voice because, you know, speaking every day, and she didn't speak in the right place with the right resonance. And yeah, so we started working first on that, and then she wanted to sing as well, and it was very nice because since then she has no vocal problems. So it's interesting, you know, and it's also for her everyday life, it's completely changed. She has much more security because voice is our identity. So when you have people who start to lose the voice, it's you feel very insecure suddenly. It's very interesting thing how it plays with your mindset. And it's important to know that as well. And it's very psychological. So it's very, very hard to be carefree for that 1 hour of your singing lesson. But you have to forget all the other struggles, and you have to be in the moment.
Presence.
And do it.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do, actually, huh? So yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of letting go, as you said, of ego and what you think you are and what you think people think of you. Because I've started working with you for like a year and a half, maybe,
Yes.
and everyone is always like, oh, I would never dare taking a singing lesson. I'm too
why?
embarrassed. Either it's well, I don't sing the right notes, or, you know, my teacher when I was
course.
5 told me that I was a crap at singing. And,
Oh, what an asshole.
and people just keep these stories forever.
Yes, that's a pity, huh?
Yeah.
But you know, also the thing is that it's also everyday life. You know, singing is energy. It's an energy flow, and I always say that, you know, to sing and sing very high, for instance, in the voice, it's very important to. It's a kind of a cultivated scream, you know. But how to teach that to people who have been told since they're 2 years old, when they actually started screaming, shh, you know?
Yeah.
So people, especially, and then it's also very, very linked to like your heritage, your customs, and your language. So, you know, the French, they're really special in Paris. You know, everybody's speaking like that. So when you ask them to say hello, you know, they forgot how to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's hello. It's really hard, you know. I understand it can be very hard. So this is why, you know, the people who speak like Italians, they have much easier job singing than French. It's interesting. Everything is kind of
Intertwined, yeah. I'm gonna wrap it up and ask you
Yes.
one last question. I mean, we've touched on it already, but what role do you think music serves for humanity? And for
Oh
our
my
lives?
God!
It's a big one.
Do you have another hour? No.
In a nutshell.
What role
Yeah, I
does
mean,
it serve?
yeah. It feels like every culture forever has always had some form of music attached to them, and a lot of times it was also linked to God.
Well, I think music, for me, it's still an unknown. I don't know what it really is, to be honest. It's a mysterious, it's a mystic thing. We know how physiologically it works. You know, you take some breath and then it goes through your larynx and then touches the vocal cords. They start to vibrate and then the sound, you know, comes out of your mouth. But then we can do different sounds with it, and you can first, you know, we can do different animal sounds, and, you know, I guess when we were like in prehistoric times, you know, they knew they also recognized with sounds when the bad animal is coming. Okay, we should hide, and, you know, so there is something extremely basic, you know, with music, and then as we developed, it develops as well, you know. Then so the language developed, and then of course our expression develops. So I think it's intertwined 100% with everything that we did. Language is music. Every language has its own different music, different musicality, different way to form sentences or speak or accents, everything else. Because for me, language is already music, right? Or any sound is music, you know. So in the beginning, of course, it was very rhythmical. It was also very much linked, as you said, to spiritual. I guess those early guys probably ate either some weird mushrooms or smoked some shit, I don't know. But they were always, kind of looking for that transcending thing, to be able to speak with gods and shamans and all that, even nowadays, And it's very interesting how that's always connected with special rhythmical sounds, In order to get there is this, there's something happening. And then when there is something to express on the higher level, the language itself doesn't suffice. You need more. And I think this is where we started to sing. Because we also noticed that then singing, and that is a very weird thing, is that it can be soothing for a baby. It can put somebody to sleep.
Can wake you up.
It can wake you up. If you are 10 people and there's an army of 30 people, and you start singing La Marseillaise, and then you suddenly feel like demigods, and then they kick their ass. It's very interesting. It's a very uplifting thing. And then we celebrate things with music, When we want this higher emotional level, we will use music to do it. And it's always been there. So before the radio, we were always, there were musicians going around like bards and people who were, with lute and they were highly appreciated because imagine like he's just walking around and there's a wedding, oh, come! And then they would get to eat, they would be paid. And of course the celebration would be bigger because there is a musician with a fiddle or with a lute or whatever thing. So that's one thing. And then, of course, as soon as we have some kind of gathering, we were always singing. I don't know why. It's in our DNA, It's just, it lifts up the spirits. Nowadays, how to explain it better is if we are making a party, the first thing that goes on is, let's put some music. The second is, let's give them something to drink so they can relax, So it's very interesting. It can be very uplifting. It's very liberating. And I think it means a great deal to humanity. I think it's one of the most important things there is, to be honest. People forget. We had COVID and everybody experienced what it means to be alone and what it means to not be able to go out. And then what did we do? We turned to books, films, and music. Everything that always government cuts when we have to prepare for better economy, war with Putin or whatever the hell they're doing. They always cut first those things. There's never enough money for education and for arts. And they're vital. If you don't have them, people go absolutely nuts. And that's a very interesting thing to talk about, I think. I think that if we did much more of that, if the money went there into arts, rather than making arms and the new whatever, into scientific things, discovering new medicines and more arts, I think it would be a happier place, definitely. Artisanal art especially, it is a very beautiful thing. Art is not just music, it's everything. Let's take architecture. Before, you had people, you had sculptors, you had painters, you had people who really did all the ornamentations. Then you had different stones. There are no ornamentations anymore. There are no more paintings, frescoes, anywhere, very few. So where's all the glass work or the mosaic or just about when you think about those things, right? So I think that we will need to rethink a lot of things, right?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. We thank our guests for their trust, and we thank you for being a part of our community. If you like this episode and want to support our work, consider ranking our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, please share our work with them to help them spread the dream of a conscious, creative community. Talk soon.